Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous. On to item number 8, drainage rehabilitation list of priority projects. The recommendation of the report is that the prioritised list of drainage rehabilitation projects as detailed in attachment 3 of the report by Senior Planning Officer dated 26th of October 2020 be considered when developing Council's 2021-2022 capital works budget. I think we're back on live stream. Now that we're back on, apologies for the technical issues. We have kept minutes and we're now on item number 8, which is drainage rehabilitation list of priority projects. I've just read out the recommendation and just asking for a mover. Thank you, Councillor Fichtner. And a seconder, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Does anyone wish to ask the relevant council officer any questions? No? I'll then open the matter for discussion. There being no discussion, we move on to, I'll ask now for a vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. We now move on to item number 9, which is the curb and channel rehabilitation priority list of projects. The recommendation of the report is that the prioritised list of curb and channel rehabilitation projects as detailed in the attachment 3 of the report by Senior Planning Officer dated the 3rd of November 2020 be considered when developing Council's 2021-2022 capital works budget. May I have a mover for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. A seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Fichtner. Does anyone wish to ask the relevant council officer a question? There being no questions, would anyone like to... I'll now open the floor for discussion. There being no discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. We'll now move on to item number 10, which is the sealed road rehabilitation priority list of projects. The recommendation of the report is that the prioritised list of sealed road rehabilitation projects as detailed in attachment 3 of the report by Senior Planning Officer dated 6th of November 2020 be considered when developing Council's 2021-2022 capital works budget. May I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Fichtner. Would anyone like to ask the relevant council officer a question? There being no questions, I now open the matter up for discussion. Yes, Councillor Fichtner.
I think that it's important to note for the meeting the amount of work by council officers that's all encompassed in items 2 through 10. It's a huge amount of work and it puts our priority listings front-facing for the public to view and analyse what our prioritisation methodology is. I think it's a great step forward for good governance on our behalf, so that so that people, when they have inquiries about what's happening with council assets in their street, in their neighbourhood, they can quite clearly see how council officers came to a decision to prioritise. And it can be quite complex, when you have to manage the matrix of safety versus, visual amenity versus, a myriad of all of the other considerations that have to be taken. So I really would like to thank council officers for all of their hard work and for publishing this front-facing for the community to see.
Thank you, Councillor Fichtner. Any other points of discussion? I think that's a thanks to the Infrastructure and Engineering Department. Thank you, Mr Dill, and thank you to your team for providing a thorough list of projects for us to review during the Capital Works budget process this year. Thank you. Is there any? There's no other discussion? In that case, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. We now move on to item 11, which is the IGO annual report card for 2019-2020. There are 2 recommendations here, and I propose that we deal with both of them together. So recommendation A is that the report be received and contents noted. The second is that the Council continue to support the City of Ipswich Transport Plan IGO and give regard to the IGO mode shared targets and a shift to more sustainable forms of travel in Ipswich when considering future council investment priorities. May I have a mover for those 2 recommendations? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Conzelman. Would anyone like to ask a question of the relevant council officer? No? I'll put that out for discussion. Yeah.
I just have one thing to say about this, and it's quite an honest report card that we've been given, and it's probably not the result that anyone in this organisation is hoping for, but it really highlights the work that needs to be done in this space. Particularly when we're considering other modes of transport. There's so many vehicles on our road, and our community is disconnected with, inefficient public transport, disconnected, bikeways in the city. So I think we need to realise the amount of work that needs to go, and this commitment that we're making in continuing to support the IGO means that we need to, as a council, think a little bit more progressively about how we tackle some of these problems moving forward. So again, I would just like to thank the council officers for putting this front and centre and saying, look, we're not where we want to be, but there's an opportunity for us to move on this and make way for a greener and healthier city that's less dependent on cars, and get our community moving.
I guess Councillor Fickner had a bit of a different view. I looked at it and was quite pleased with the number of projects that were completed, and the rest are in progress. There were no, red lights. But yeah, there's obviously significant work in the detailed design for a number of bikeways and a few other areas as well. And I think it's also good to highlight the deliverables, which are on, I'm not sure what page, I think it's page 3 of the actual overview and statistics, noting that the following key projects were completed in the financial year. The City of Ipswich parking pricing strategy, the IGO Public Transport Advocacy and Action Plan, the IGO Road Safety Action Plan, the IGO Performance and Data Strategy, the Ipswich to Springfield Central Rail Corridor Strategic Business Case, the Ipswich City Centre Cross River Connectivity Preliminary Business Case, the Redbank Plains Road Stage 4 Corridor Plan, the Ipswich Inner CBD Cycle Network Corridor Plan, the upgrade of the Old Toowoomba Road in Leichhardt, upgrade of Brisbane Street in West Ipswich, the Swilsbury Road and Briggs Road new signalised intersection, School Road and Fernbrook new signalised intersection, as well as the construction of the Brassel Bikeway Stage 7. I think these are all quite significant pieces of work that the council has done, and a lot of that would have been based on, all of it's based on need, but also based on significant feedback from residents as well. So I think it's quite something to cheer about. Thank you. Is there any other discussion on item 11? There be no other discussion. I'll put the 2 recommendations to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. We're now on to item 12, which is the road resurfacing and maintenance Ipswich region. There are 4 parts to this recommendation. I propose that we move all 4 together, if there's no objection to that. So the recommendation, I'll take it as read because it is quite wordy. And I note that we are looking to enter into a contract with 2 suppliers for roads resurfacing and maintenance under a schedule agreement, and the estimated sum of $40 million, including GST. Total cost if all extensions are exercised for a period of 2 years. And those 2 suppliers are Stanley, McAdam Proprietary Limited and RPQ Asphalt Proprietary Limited. May I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Fickner. And a seconder, Councillor Conzelman. May I ask the relevant council officer to come down, please?
Richard White, Manager of Procurement.
Could you outline for us if these 2 suppliers are local?
Yes, RPQ is local business, however owned by a larger organisation. The business itself is based at Swanbank and historically local. The Stanley McAdam, that's RPQ, asphalt. Stanley McAdam has a head office in Brendale but has an asphalt plant in North Tivoli, and they nominate 77% of their spend as within the local community. 60 local staff at RPQ and 44 local staff with Stanley McAdam.
Thank you. And have all our suppliers been through, will internal audit part of all?
Yes,
Of
they've
the-
been reviewed, and there is a confidential attachment to this.
Okay.
There is a yes, and there's a confidential attachment to this.
Okay. Are there any other questions? No, thank you very much, Mr. White. I'll open this one up for discussion. There being no discussion, I'll put these 4 recommendations to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous. We now move on to item 13. I think, Councillor Fechner, you indicated that you were leaving for this particular one. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Fechner's no longer in the room. Sorry about that. So this is for the preferred supplier arrangements for the supply of arboriculture services. And again, similar to the previous one, there are 4 recommendations. I will move all 4 together if there are no objections. No. It outlines council entering into contract with a number of service providers for arboriculture services for a period of 3 years. And if each contract is utilised to its full extensions, it's a contract that will be over $5 million. May I please have a mover? Councillor Doyle, thank you. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Madsen. We would like to I'll ask the relevant council officer to come to the stand, please.
Richard White, Manager of Procurement.
Thank you very much, Mr. White. Could you please outline if any of these organisations have a link to Ipswich? Are they owned here? Do they have branches here?
Yeah, so we've got a mix. So a supply arrangement like this is a number of services, so a number of suppliers will use them in various ways. So all employ some level of local staff.
All 7 do?
Yes.
Thank you.
And by Ipswich requires local spend for this type of contract rather than local head office. However, we do also have a lot of local head offices here. So I'll flag the ones that are. So Bushmont Enterprises has 9 staff, nominating 14 local businesses and is based at South Ripley. Most of the other ones, there's one, Savco, 60 local staff with its head office at Briggs Road in Raceview, and Dara, so Benjamin, and then a number of them, or Dinmore as well here. So branch office at Dinmore for River City Garden Lawn. Oh, and Heritage Tree Services has one out at Walloon, a branch office.
Active Tree Services, what's their link with Ipswich?
Which one, sorry?
Active Tree Services?
They are nominating local businesses, and they have 3 staff. I would expect that they have, because of the contract and historical contracts here, they hire local staff that do the jobs out here, but they are at Brendale.
Okay. And Power Clear?
8 staff, 2 nominated local businesses, but at Logan Home. So no actual presence here beyond local staff.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other just questions for Mr. White? No, thank you very much, Mr. White. Appreciate that. I now open this up for discussion. There being no discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous, knowing that Councillor Fichtner's not in the room. And now we'll buzz for Councillor Fichtner. May I just check on there, the Councillor Jonica is still crossed off on that list?
Yes, she is, and it will show because she's up apology at the top, so it shows she hasn't voted and she's an apology.
But she walked in. Yeah, she walked in some time ago.
9:03, Councillor Jonica arrived.
9:03. My apologies. My apologies. I didn't announce it. Then I think we need to go back and look at
Yeah, just make sure
the
all the
votes.
voting's, yeah,
there.
we'll correct that.
I'll correct that. Welcome back, Councillor Fechner.
Thank you.
On to item 14, which is the IED Capital Portfolio Financial Performance Report for October 2020. The recommendation of the report is that the monthly financial performance report on the Infrastructure and Environment Department Capital Portfolio Budget for 2020-2021 be received and the contents noted. May I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Milligan. May I ask for the relevant council officer to come to the lectern, please? State your name and your position.
Good morning, Mayor, Councillors. Jeff Keats, Chief Financial Officer.
Just in succinctly,
Yes.
what are the highlights of this report?
Okay,
And then I'll ask you about what are the risk areas.
okay, sure. The report for you just outlines the current status of the monthly financial performance of the IED Capital Program. It highlights to you the level of expenditure that it's occurred for the month and the year to date and the key major variances across those areas. So the key points there, and also forecasts out as part of that what the likely spend is to be by the end of the financial year. So highlighting the main points there, the budget's about 86 million, forecasting now is to be about 83 million. And there's the reasons in the report about 4 key points as to why that forecast has dropped down in the month by that $3 million.
That's basically the spend has been moved on some of those to the
So,
next
yeah,
financial
that's
year?
correct. Some expenditure has moved out. There was a level of $1 million that related to, if you remember in the COVID stimulus, we weren't sure at the end whether that was going to be bring forward projects or from existing projects. So we had an allocation of $1 million in case we needed to bring in specifics. The team has identified that now that that's obviously from projects within the program, and therefore that allocation is not required in the year. So there's $1 million there and some resequencing of works, which has brought that level down lower. Correct me.
Okay. Thank you. Are there anything that's of medium to high risk that we should be aware of?
I think in terms of risks for the committee and to be aware of is, and it's been ongoing discussions, is obviously the level of expenditure now. You can see year to date it's been only about $12 million. So on an average where that sits, you can see, and it's highlighted in the report, that there's forecast for considerable increase in expenditure through the months of January through to June. So the key point, I know the IED team's been working closely internally and also with the procurement teams in relation to that delivery program and to get more confidence in relation to that delivery programs. From a risk perspective, obviously there's a significant increase in expenditure. Some programs are the sealed roads rehabilitation, and obviously they can occur fairly quickly. But that would be the risk to highlight from a finance perspective, is that level of expenditure and continuing to work through those program deliveries.
I guess Mr. Kitch, my concern is that the year-to-date
Correct, is like-
actuals is not correlating with the budget.
Correct.
And how do we know that that will continue?
Yeah.
Or it'll be addressed?
Yeah, and I guess that's probably a key one for the department to answer, probably more so than me. All I can say is that's reviewed monthly, and the forecast is reviewed monthly when it comes to us and says, well, this is what we've spent, this is what we're forecasting to spend. That's reviewed through the delivery teams on a monthly basis. So that's what's outlined the expenditure at 83 million at the moment. But you're correct, the year-to-date expenditure pattern is at a significantly lower level. But there are some key projects that are coming forward in the next 6 months which will increase that expenditure. Is there anything else you want to add?
Any other questions for Mr. Keach before we go to Mr. Dill? Thank you, Mr. Keach.
Thank you.
Mr. Dill, would you please state your name and your position, please?
Morning, Mayor and Councillors. Charlie Dill, General Manager, Infrastructure and Environment.
Mr. Dill, the year-to-date actuals to be compared with the budget, is that because of efficiencies or are projects running late, or what's the cause of that?
Some of all of that, Mayor. So there are some projects that have come in under budget, and that's shown in those figures there as some potential savings. There are also projects that have to be delivered due to their size over a number of years, which split from this financial year and into the next financial year as well. Some of the spend for those projects has been pushed into the next financial year. Completion timeframe for the projects are still on track, or still for that period of time. It's just the spend, the burn rate is later in the projects when their actual construction is happening. Some of the service relocations of works has been delayed with some authorities, working with authorities to get design approvals and so forth through, and they're starting to progress as well. There was some complexities with procurement activities. As council's considered today, there was a number of procurements which are of significant value, one being the reseal program. That equates to about $12 million worth of work for this financial year. So now that we have that, we can now progress that as rapidly as we can. It's just that what we are forecasting to do is spend all the money that we're showing in the report later in the financial year, which is the risk.
So putting money aside, if we look at the projects that we have listed on our capital works project, will we be delivering on all those projects still, or are there some that are being adjusted?
That's what we're currently forecasting, yes. And some of them, if not completed this financial year, are commenced this financial year and completed early next financial year. So in terms of what projects are we going to deliver, everything that we're saying, just not necessarily by the end of the financial year.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of Mr. Dill? No, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Let's ask you, CEO, any concerns or issues with the capital works program to date?
Well, on the numbers, it will be a challenge to get the delivery.
Assumption as well.
Yes, so we'll have another closer look. Typically, people tend to be optimistic and things go wrong. And, for example, there's a major project there where we've got some service providers. They're not our people. They are, infrastructure providers like a gas or power. And their sense of urgency isn't as high as ours. If they don't, say, well, we can't relocate our wires for another 3 months, that pushes everything behind, because obviously when you're working in brownfields, you rely on those people. So, look, I have concerns potentially about the timing, given the acceleration that's required. Ultimately, as Mr. Dill said, the work will be done and will be delivered. It may be delivered a little bit later in the calendar year, but that's based on, those numbers there are based on our project manager's granular assessment of individual pieces of work. But history does show that from time to time, some of those pieces of work get affected, and then they affect the overall.
Thank you very much. I'll open up for discussion. There being no discussion, I'll then put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Move on to item 15, which is the Local Government Illegal Dumping Partnership Program. The recommendation for item 15 is that council note the contents of the report and the attachment. May I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Drill. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Johnick. Would anyone like to ask the relevant council officer any questions on this item? Yes, Councillor Johnick? Yes, please. Thank you. Good morning. One stating your name and your position, please.
Good morning, my name's Alicia Connaughton. I'm the Manager of Compliance.
Thank you, Ms Connaughton. Councillor Johnick.
Hi, I'm just wanting to ask in relation to the illegal dumping and litter prevention strategy that we've got. Will we put any actions into place from the recommendations from that strategy with this grant money? In particular, raising community awareness?
We have. In the report, you'll notice there was some Facebook advertising, so that's part of raising awareness.
Yep.
We've also done other, the grant money was specifically set aside for labour resources and a vehicle. But in combination with that, there was the Facebook advertising, but also Facebook advertising that's targeted towards enforcement, which was like an amount of waste was left on a roadside. It was quite a busy road, so we put an ad on the Ipswich Facebook page saying, does anyone have a dash cam? Was anyone in the area? Like similar to alerts, I guess, that the police do. So we are raising community awareness. And if you noticed in that Facebook post, there was 3,064 engagements, which is very high. So it indicated to us that it is a topical issue for the community.
Yeah, excellent. There was another action point recommended that we name offenders publicly, and it said that we're actually doing that. Are we?
Not that I'm aware of. We have something recently that came up, and it was a camera footage that was captured.
Yep.
And it had a business name on the side of the vehicle, but not necessarily, we couldn't identify a number plate. So I've sent off to our right to information or information privacy section to seek advice if we can release that to identify who the, offender may be.
Yeah. Because the existing actions, it specifies publicly reporting on people who are found guilty of littering and dumping offences, and then utilising social media to increase community awareness on reporting offenders. I think that when we sat down together and had discussions, I learned a lot about where the litter can come from, and so I think that if we can get that out into the public as well with, for instance, people that are employing people from Airtasker to take rubbish away and things like that, so people are more aware of who's dumping. It could actually be connected to them in some way.
Oh, you mean like, highlighting to the public where the litter comes from, or what, the new trend of the Airtasker or Facebook?
Yeah.
Yes, it is something that we're considering. For me, not necessarily the naming and shaming, for me the information was that there are offences and there are fines, and I don't think people realise how much the fines are. So it was highlighting that there has been a successful prosecution. I guess the research found that it was more the risk of being caught and the amount of the penalty. So we had great success with the curbside dumping just by having the flyers that said, this is curbside dumping, it'll be over the 200 litres of volume, so it's a $2,500 fine, and generally by that afternoon the couch is back inside someone's front yard. So highlighting how expensive the offence is if you are caught, and highlighting that you can and will be caught.
Yeah.
So that was what they found from the state government affected the behaviour change. And I guess you'll see in the particularly where the signs that were effective were so it wasn't necessarily the signs about, protect the environment and, keep Ipswich beautiful, those sort of anti-littering signs. It was more the actual harder enforcement signs. So they found psychologically it was either a picture of a camera or those owl eyes that affected people's behaviour change.
Yeah.
But it is something that we could highlight, that be careful who you're engaging to take your rubbish away, and make sure that it is dumped in an appropriate or a legal way.
Yeah, I think I'm getting a lot of community feedback about illegal dumping, so it's a hot topic. So I think that it would be good to know, for our public to know how much we're doing to prevent it, and to the extent of what we're doing to prevent illegal dumping. Yeah.
Do you mean like how I explained about the information notices?
Yeah, I just think more awareness, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there has been, I think, one of the ways that I discussed was the information notices. They've issued, I've got the stats, they've issued, I think it was 16 or 17 so far. So that's if someone's thrown out waste and there's a receipt in it, or a utility bill, then we can request the information from the source. Is that...
Oh, yeah, one of the...
Like an education topic?
Yeah, I guess more education topics on Facebook and things like that, so that people understand where the waste is coming from and that we're actually trying to do something about it.
Yep.
And then that we are penalising people as well for it. Yeah. But thank you for all your work, Alicia.
Oh, you're welcome.
Norton.
Sorry.
Ms. Connell, I know that this was a generous grant from the state government, from the Department of Environment and Science, for two people to work. We received $200,000.
Yes, that's correct.
And I think we can see the benefits of it. Are there any, do we know if the program is continuing next year, or what are the plans?
We did make inquiries. At the moment, well, we were told they have no plans to continue it at the moment, and we believe the funding came from the waste levy, so they were assessing. And we also were advised they overspent, like with the allocation of the grants, more than was budgeted. So we just have no information. We don't know if they're going to continue or not.
Do you think it was a worthwhile activity?
Oh, definitely. Like an example is, I guess, on average from 2017 until we got the officers, they used to average about 9 infringements a year, and in 4 months we've issued 16 infringements. So you can see having dedicated resources, because it's quite technical, the cameras and the installation, and it needs 2 people for workplace health and safety reasons, because to try and prevent theft, they have to get an extension ladder and get to the top of the ladder so that they're not easily stolen. So it needs 2 people to place it, but you have to know how to place it so that at night time, when some of the dumping is done, the reflection of the headlights, so you have to know how to angle the cameras to be able to get the evidence.
Thank you, Ms. Connaughton. No other questions? Thank you very much. And I'll open it up for discussion. I know that when we have discussions, we get a lot of complaints about illegal dumping, and it looks like this has been a very effective program. So I think we should probably write to our state members and thank them for their support in this, and hopefully they'll look forward to supporting us going into the future as well for this program.
If I might comment,
Yes,
one of the side effects of the waste levy is an increased motivation by people to dump illegally, and some of the circumstances that Councillor Johnick was talking about. Their task of people remove waste from people's homes, get paid for it, and then have to pay reasonably expensive dumping fees. There is, for certain people, an incentive to dump. So certainly in other states, there's been significant funding flowing to councils off this, because it's one of the side effects of a waste levy, and the government has significant income streams flowing from that as well.
It's also,
Thank you.
Mayor, it was also interesting and good that Alicia explained just how technical the use of the cameras are, workplace health and safety issues. Within Division 3, and Councillor Johnick and I have discussed this several times. It's an issue we share, a problem we share. We have many residents coming to us around illegal dumping and complaints, and why isn't the council doing more? Why aren't we monitoring? Why aren't we using cameras? So it just highlights that it is an expensive compliance, I guess, program to run, and erecting and setting up the cameras is time consuming and quite a technical piece.
Yeah.
And just through you, Chair, it's good that our community knows that we are proactive in this space. So it would be nice to get that message out a little bit more, so that they know how hard that our teams are working and to what extent they're going to, like by getting details from receipts and trace. It's phenomenal that level of detective work has to exist to catch people out that are dumping on the side of the road in our bushland. So
I'd like to also see a greater advertising or marketing piece in this space to remind residents of their obligations and just how low cost it actually is, for instance, to order an extra bin pickup, a residential bin, if you want to do a clean-up at home. It's under $20. It doesn't cost a lot of money. It doesn't cost a lot of money to do the right thing. We absolutely need an education piece around this.
I agree, and I thought it was very interesting. Ms. Connaughton talked about, I guess, the carrot and the stick. It's one thing to say, please keep Ipswich beautiful, but obviously the sign saying that, if you dump here, the fine is over $2,000, that the stick also has been quite effective as well.
It's interesting the commentary you see via social media. If someone's posting pictures, and a lot of members of the community are outraged, they post pictures of the illegal dumping, and then you will get some comments that, council should introduce tip vouchers, which is always pleasing to see though, members of the public responding on our behalf, outlining that we actually have cheap fees here in Ipswich compared to other local government areas with regard to dumping, and that just because you don't have a free tip voucher gives you the right to illegally dump, so. Big issue.
Yes.
Yeah, I think through you, Chair, the reason why I went down this illegal dumping rabbit hole was about tip vouchers to begin with, and it won't solve the illegal dumping issue because our tip fees of $12 for half a tonne of rubbish are amazingly low cost. So it's not about that at all. It's about people's psychology when it comes to dumping. So, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Johnny. Any other discussion? There being no other discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote to note the contents of the report and the attachment. Those in favour, please raise your hand. I see it's unanimous. Thank you. We'll move on to item 16, which is the court action status report. That recommendation of the report is that the report be received and the contents noted. May I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Fichtner. Are there any questions of the relevant council officer on the court action reports? You'd like to ask a question, Councillor Doyle?
No, I don't, but I think there was a problem with my mic. I was just like
Oh, okay.
to confirm that
Yes.
will now be heard.
May I just check with Ben and Harrison, can you hear the Deputy Mayor?
Good morning.
You can hear. Wonderful, thank you. We have brand new microphones that are completely wireless, so it's testing the new technology. Thank you. I'll move back to item 16, the court action status report. We've had it moved and seconded. Would anyone like to ask a question of the relevant council officer? No? In that case, I'll move the matter for discussion. Is there any discussion on any of the points? No? I'll then move the matter for a vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. I see that's unanimous. Move on to item 17, which is the exercise of delegation report. The recommendation is that the report be received and the contents noted. May I please ask for a mover? Thank you, Councillor Johnnick. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. Would anyone like to ask the relevant council officer any questions on this report? There being none, I'll move the matter for a discussion. There being no discussion, I'll move the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you, it's unanimous. We now move on to item 18, which is a notice of motion from Councillor Fichtner on the opportunities for writing the Revolution Report recommendations. So I'll hand over to you, Councillor Fichtner, if you wish to move.
So I propose that we move all three recommendations, and they are that Council note the recent McKell Institute Active Transport Report, Riding the Revolution, a new approach to active transport in South East Queensland, and consider its recommendations. And that a report be prepared which identifies the opportunity for Riding the Revolution Report recommendations to be incorporated in Council's future active transport planning activities and be considered during a future review of the City of Ipswich IGO Active Transport Plan. And C, that a report be presented to a future meeting of Growth, Infrastructure and Waste Committee no later than March 2021.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Those three motions? Thank you, Councillor Johnnick. I'll then open the... Do anyone like to ask any council officers any questions? No? I'll then open it up for discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'd just like to give everyone a brief, just testing the mic, sorry. don't know.
Yeah, okay. May I just check with Ben and Harrison, is Councillor Fichtner's microphone working? Would you like to test it?
Just testing, but there's no lights on the microphone. Is it all good? Yeah, I've just got no lights on, that's all.
There's no green light?
There's no green light. And no red light either.
Okay. Can you hear Councillor Fichtner when he speaks?
That's not good.
I'll just pause while we address the technical issue. I think the CEO is offering to give you his microphone. And we can share CEO if required. No. No, don't do that. Thank you, Councillor Fichtner. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's important to note that the McKell Institute is a progressive research institute dedicated to providing practical and innovative solutions to contemporary policy challenges. Councillor Madsen and I had the fortune of attending the launch of the paper for Writing the Revolution and learning about some exciting new ways of addressing active transport issues. And I think it's quite timely that we consider active transport in a very meaningful way and in a way that will benefit our city. I was speaking with Rachel Nolan, who under her leadership presented this paper and she gave me a few facts, and I think that for the benefit of the room, it's important to note that according to the West Moreton Diabetes Alliance strategy, that 71% of people in the West Moreton region are overweight or obese. She also said that it was important to note that Queensland has one of the largest per capita carbon footprints in the world. And sustainable active transport is the answer to both of these. So to consider the recommendations presented in the report is important to us. Council last month at our ordinary meeting adopted the sustainability strategy, and it's one of the first times that we as a council in history have identified that climate change and climate science is real and that it needs to be considered when we're developing public policy. So it seems erroneous to suggest that this is a progressive thought because it's not all that progressive. The science is there. We need to be considering other modes of transport, not only for the environment, but for the health and well-being of the people who live in our local government area. So it's very exciting for me to introduce this notice of motion, and I look forward to seeing the creative ways that our council officers can incorporate potentially some of the recommendations presented in the report to us at a future meeting of council.
Thank you, Councillor Fichtner. Any other discussion? Yes, Councillor Madsen.
Mine's flashing red.
Just like to raise some of the other discussion that took part at the event that Councillor Fichtner and I went to for the launch of the Writing the Revolution report. A lot of discussion was had on recent developments in technology, and there's a lot of alternative transport methods that are becoming more viable. There's a lot of discussion about e-bikes and e-scooters and how they can make it a lot easier for people who traditionally would feel that they weren't fit enough to ride to work. They can now do that. Rather than putting another car on the road, an e-bike is much better use of resources. It's much more affordable for a second commuter option in a household. So while technology is evolving and better solutions are coming forward, we need to consider them.
Thank you, Councillor Madsen. Any other discussion? I don't think there's... Does anyone want to ask questions of Mr Dill? I think he seems to indicate he wishes to say something about this. Yes? Okay, I'll ask Mr Dill to come forward. I don't have any questions for you, but you've indicated you'd like to say something, Mr Dill.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, councillors. Look, I appreciate the notice of motion. Excellent suggestions. It very much...
Avid cyclist, Mr. Dill.
That was a few years ago, Mayor. Look, it very much aligns with our IGO strategy and actions within that, and it's very much highlighted by the status report for IGO that was presented today, in that we need to do more to change the culture within the community. The only thing I was going to comment for Council's consideration is some of the detail within the recommendations. A, as I said, there is no concern there. B, we do we can certainly consider that and provide a report if required, a separate report. However, we do a review of the council's cycling policies as well. So whether council would be happy to for us to consider this as part of those policy reviews to make the review process a little bit more efficient, and the motion C. Given the timeframes and committee calendars and resourcing constraints currently, March might be very much a struggle to get a response back. So the suggestion would be May for Council's consideration.
Yep, as the mover, I would like to take the feedback of Mr. Dill and incorporate that into...
May I ask just a question before, if that's okay?
You may.
You talk about the cycling. To me, Riding the Revolution isn't just about cycling. We're looking at different alternative modes of transport, which may not just be cycling. So would the cycling review be looking just at cycling or outside cycling as well, like
well, the cycling
scooters and other forms?
Well, we do review all forms of all modes of transport. Cycling, whether it's scooters, we have done some reviews of scooters previously, so it can incorporate all those, all the matters.
Sorry, Councillor Fechner, did you say you wish to move an amendment to your motion?
Yeah, a variation.
Or variation, sorry.
Yep, happy for the report to be presented in May and
So
recognise that there are resourcing
So
struggles.
motion C will be no later than May 2021?
That's correct.
Is that your yes? Can I just check with Councillor Johnnick, are you okay with that variation? Thank you. And for B, did you wish to...
And that a report be prepared which identifies the opportunities of riding the revolution. So maybe, Vicky, we could amend that to say...
you said, Councillor, Mr. Dill, that it's called a cycling review. What's the actual, or is it the active transport plan?
So we could review that as part of the cycling policies.
At the review of Ipswich's cycling policies, at the review of Ipswich City Council's cycling policy, is it one or multiple
Policies.
policies in the plural?
May I suggest, Councillor, that instead of have take out the IGO active transport plan, just put in council's cycling policies?
Yep.
Cycling?
Yep.
Would that be a...
Yes.
A future review of... I think the idea of the proposed amendments from Mr. Dill was trying to avoid that a separate report be prepared,
Yes.
Which is still the substantive motion there. So we need to remove that a report be prepared. Perfect, thank you, Vicky.
I think it was policies,
The-
wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. During the review of... council officers identify opportunities. That during a review of the City of Ipswich cycling policies, council officers identify opportunities for Riding the Revolution report recommendations to be incorporated in the review of future active transport planning activities. That needs to be.
To be considered.
Would you remove in the review of?
Thanks, Vic. That looks good.
That's your variation you're putting forward, councillor?
And then I guess C is that this report be presented. Or that this review, rather. Mr. Dill, are you okay with that?
Thank you.
So that's your variation, councillor
Councillor
Fechner?
Johnny? Yep, that's my
Councillor
variation.
Johnny, do you
I'm fine
concur
with
with that?
that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr Dill. I'll open this up now for further discussion. There being no further discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. I see that's unanimous. Thank you very much. We move on to item 19, which is a notice of motion from the Deputy Mayor on the Waste and Circular Economy Transformation Directive. Deputy Mayor, I'll hand over to you to move the motion.
Thank you. Before I begin, can I just confirm that the audio is okay?
Thank you.
Do you want to test it, Councillor?
Good morning. Can I confirm that the audio is okay?
I'm not getting any nods over there. Ben or Harrison, can you hear? Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll hand over to you to move the motion.
Okay. Good morning. I can see that everyone has their waste and circular economy transformation policy directive, which is looking fantastic. So thank you to everyone for producing that. My notice of motion relates to for council to resolve to commit to the following recommendations. Firstly, adopt the below waste and circular economy transformation directive. To guide the strategic agenda and operational activities of council in addressing the myriad of complex waste and resource recovery challenges and opportunities faced by the city today and in the future. Secondly, delegate to the Chief Executive Officer the establishment of an internal program with adequate resourcing to develop a corresponding strategy and implementation plan that will deliver outcomes aligned with the Waste and Circular Economy Transformation Directive. Third, delegate to the Chief Executive Officer the establishment of a joint waste and circular economy transformation task force with the Queensland Government and key stakeholders. The Joint Task Force will collaborate on solutions that address negative community impacts, including odour, air and noise quality, and transform the local industry through state government policy and legislative levers. Actions taken by the Joint Task Force should align with the intent of the Waste and Circular Economy Transformation Directive. Fourth, proactively monitor compliance of waste and resource recovery operations in Ipswich and expedite enforcement of non-compliant activities within the power of Council's delegations to drive industry performance improvements. And finally, number 5, prepare a report to Council quarterly to provide an update on the progress of the Waste and Circular Economy Transformation Directive program implementation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Fechner. Thank you very much. Do we wish to call the council officers here or at this stage? No. In that case, I'll hand over to the Deputy Mayor for to start off any discussion.
Thank you. Over the past 2 decades, the City of Ipswich has experienced significant growth in solid waste treatment plants and landfills as a result of, amongst other things, the city's geostrategic location as a growth corridor in southeast Queensland, the presence of former mine sites and voids, proximity to high-growth residential and industrial areas, and the presence of existing waste and resource recovery industries. In 2018-19, Queensland has generated 11.04 million tonnes of waste. Approximately 4.23 million tonnes of that waste was disposed of in private landfills in Ipswich. Since being elected, councillors have been developing a considered and concerted new approach to addressing the complex set of challenges and opportunities posed by waste disposal within the Ipswich City Council local government area. The proposed policy directive will guide Council's strategic and operational approach to managing and influencing systemic change across waste, resource recovery, recycling and the circular economy to deliver better outcomes for the City of Ipswich and its residents toward 2030. So what does the proposed policy directive will guide Council's strategic and operational approach to managing and influencing systemic change across waste actually mean in reality? It is clear that the formal council did not provide strategic direction to council officers on waste issues. This has meant council departments have been left to make the difficult decisions, such as how much of ratepayers' money should be spent on pursuing waste operators who do not comply with the conditions of their approval, and certainly no monies were ever allocated for our waste and compliance departments to beef up their staff numbers, as well as invest in the expensive technologies that are required to monitor the waste activities. My notice of motion and this group of councillors, significant amount of work that has been done on this area since being elected in formulating the waste directive, now gives a very clear message to council officers that we expect they will use whatever resources are needed and pull whatever levers they can to achieve better outcomes for the residents of Ipswich, who have long suffered with odour and dust. Our home valuations have suffered, along with our reputation. Waste operators are also now on notice that they will be met with a higher level of monitoring and compliance enforcement. The state government are equally on notice that we will no longer be a silent passenger as we become the state's dumping ground. But this is just the beginning. This is a complex problem that will not be solved overnight. Groups have lobbied in the community for years for change with no effect. The state government has allowed the waste operators to operate in Ipswich with very little monitoring, compliance or enforcement, all the while collecting waste levy revenue, while at the same time earmarking Ipswich as the fastest growing corridor for population growth in Queensland. The two, in my view, are on a collision course. An ordered framework needs to be put in place urgently to manage the population growth with appropriate infrastructure and waste sites operating far away from residential homes. Our long-suffering residents at Collingwood Park and the surrounding older suburbs are now not alone, living with the daily odour and dust. Our residents in the newly developed estates within Ripley now also suffer daily. The Queensland Government's various websites boast the Ripley Valley Priority Development Area, known as the PDA, as being located in one of the largest urban growth areas in Australia and offering opportunities for further residential growth. There is no mention of how the odour and dust is to be managed for residents. Your elected representatives across all divisions, led by our Mayor, are committed to take up the fight for our residents, and that we have. We will not stop advocating, influencing, implementing change and creating new laws at every given turn, at every opportunity for the term of our roles. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I'll hand over to the seconder. If you have any...
Yeah, I just want to thank Councillor Doyle for such impressive words this morning. It really speaks to the hard work that we've all been putting in behind the scenes, not just the elected representatives, but the council officers as well. This is a very, very technical area, and to get one's head around it is very difficult, but that's our job as elected representatives of the city. We need to use the collective expertise and intelligence of the wonderful council officers to push this forward, to help us understand the problem better and to identify opportunities moving forward. I just want to note that this is such a huge opportunity for our region. Waste doesn't have to be negative. We have wonderful waste operators that do the right thing. Councillor Ireland and Councillor Madsen will attest to the high quality landfill that Tea Tree operate within our local government area, and they should be commended on that. And looking forward into the future, there are economic opportunities for our region to be able to take advantage of bringing jobs to our region through the waste streams that come into our local government area. Understanding the waste streams that come into our LGA has also been a very interesting journey for a lot of us. The red bin waste, that we put out weekly is just a small portion of, what we're expected to process in our private landfills. So if we can, at every opportunity, identify those economic levers that we can pull to make our region more prosperous, but also at the same time making sure these operators are doing it in a safe, environmentally sound way. I am so supportive of this notice of motion, and it's probably the biggest piece of work that we've done today.
Thank you, Councillor Fechner. Are there any other points? I think Councillor Mads is going to borrow his microphone back. Can I just confirm that you can hear Councillor Madsen in that microphone as well? Do you want to test it, Councillor Madsen?
Testing. Can't, Paul.
Oh, there's a 20-second delay apparently.
What's this?
Got the thumbs up.
Okay.
Councillor Madsen.
I just concur quite wholeheartedly with Councillor Doyle and Councillor Fechner this morning. Well said, Councillor Doyle. Councillor Ireland and I obviously represent Division 1, which takes in Redbank Plains, Ripley, close proximity to what is believed to be the source of a number of odours. As a Ripley resident, affects me at my household. You go down to the shops and you can smell it. It's a common occurrence, and we also have the Willowbank and surrounds in our division, and just the concerns from residents that there's encroachment on their households from the waste industry, that it gets closer and closer to their households. People often, regular people, they buy a house, they commit to a 30-year mortgage. They're laying down roots for some time. They're raising families. They want assurances that it's going to be safe. The environment's going to be one that they're not going to develop any ill health effects. They want clean air. We shouldn't be having that conversation in Australia in 2020. We shouldn't be talking about clean air. It should just be a standard. So in regards to doing everything we can as a council to drive our local industry to deliver best practice outcomes and protect the amenity of our residents, well, that's frankly our job, and I'm quite proud that as a group, I think we're all quite passionate to ensure that that happens. Not here to pat on backs though, there's work to do. No celebratory wines after this. The work really starts today, and I look forward to working with the rest of you on this over the rest of this term.
Thank you. Open up to...
Here. I've got nothing more to add, Chair, but 100% backing Marnie's
Councillor
Deputy Mayor's motion. So, yeah, it's onwards and upwards from here.
Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman.
I just wanted to say we appreciate leadership wherever it comes from, and I thank Councillor for taking this on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. But this is very obviously a group effort, and when I say group, I include council officers. So thank you, everyone.
Any other discussion points? I just want to thank the council organisation. They have brought forward to us consultants, industry experts with a wide variety of views and opinions from one spectrum to the other. You've been with us when we've been workshopping and having our many differences of opinion, but just trying to get to a way for us to address this for our residents. So thank you very much. And also thank this council. It's been, I think, a bonding time for us to work through what we want for our residents. And I think these 10 principles set us up quite well to make sure that residents are looked after, as well as the ability for us to tap into those economic benefits for having a circular economy as well. So thank you. No other discussion? I then put this matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. I see that it's unanimous. Thank you very much. There being no other matters arising and no other procedural motions and formal matters, I will now close this meeting at 10:15, and we will now have a 30-minute break and come back at 10:45. Thank you.